Welcome to True Echo, where powerful, real-life inspired stories meet dramatic truths and unforgettable justice. Today's story is about more than business. It's about dignity, strength, and standing up to power, no matter the cost. When a black woman CEO walks into a billionaire family's mansion expecting to close a $900 million deal, she instead faces public humiliation. But what she does next shocks the nation, and brings an entire empire to its knees. This is a story you won't forget. The sleek black sedan came to a smooth stop in front of the Hartley estate, its glossy exterior reflecting the towering wrought iron gates and manicured hedges beyond. Inside, Olivia Bennett sat still for a moment, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her heart thudded once, sharp and steady, then fell into a calm rhythm as she reached for the door handle. She stepped out with a grace that made heads turn immediately. Her tailored navy suit hugged her figure with sharp elegance, heels clicking against the cobbled path as she approached the grand marble staircase. Olivia wasn't here just as a guest, she was here to finalize a $900 million merger between her tech conglomerate, Bennett Dynamics, and the historic Hartley Corporation, a family empire dating back to the Gilded Age. Inside, chandeliers sparkled like stars, and laughter floated through the massive ballroom filled with California's wealthiest elite. Eyes turned when Olivia entered. A hush followed. She felt it like a chill breeze brushing her neck, the hesitation, the silent calculation, the disbelief that the highly touted CEO of Bennett Dynamics was not only young and female, but black. As Olivia made her way through the sea of luxury fabrics and false smiles, Michael Hartley stood near the head of the long dining table, dressed in an ivory tuxedo with a glass of champagne in hand. At 34, he was the heir to the Hartley empire, charming, arrogant, and dangerously entitled. And then came the words. "Did someone mix up and bring the help in early?" Michael called out loudly, smirking, his voice dripping with mockery. The room froze. Olivia stood still. Her body didn't flinch, but inside, something shattered. Gasps. A few awkward chuckles. No one intervened. Not even Richard Hartley, the family patriarch, who simply looked down, clutching his cane with a ghost of discomfort on his lips. Olivia, the consummate professional, offered a polite smile. She said nothing. No rage. No scene. She turned gracefully, nodded to Richard, and walked away from the table, leaving behind her untouched dessert and every illusion she once had about this partnership. But what no one in that room knew was that this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a reckoning. The cold night air brushed Olivia's face as she exited the Hartley estate, her heels striking the marble steps with calm precision. Her driver opened the door, but she paused before getting in, glancing back at the mansion glowing in warm light. From the outside, it looked like a palace. But inside? It was nothing more than a gilded cage, beautiful on the surface, rotting at the core. She sank into the leather seat and closed the door behind her with quiet finality. No tears. No visible anger. But inside her, something was burning. Not just from Michael's words, but from everyone else's silence. The clinking of crystal, the awkward giggles, the whispers that followed her like ghosts. As the sedan rolled down Mulholland Drive, her phone vibrated. A single message blinked across the screen from her board chair. "We need to talk. Urgently." Olivia exhaled, hard. She knew exactly what that meant. The deal had been talked up for months. Financial analysts had predicted it would revolutionize not just her company, but the entire West Coast tech sector. And now, with one man's entitled insult, and her decision to walk out, it was all on the verge of collapse. By the time she reached her high-rise apartment overlooking downtown Los Angeles, it was nearly midnight. She didn't bother to turn on the lights. She walked straight to the window and stared out, the city glittering beneath her like a circuit board. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Sarah Mitchell, her friend, confidant, and the company's vice president. Olivia hesitated, then answered. "Liv," Sarah's voice crackled through, breathless with urgency. What happened at the Hartleys tonight? The board is freaking out. Some are even talking about calling an emergency vote. They're worried about the deal, Olivia said flatly. They're worried about everything. The merger, our stock, your image. Olivia's jaw tensed. So let me get this straight. I'm humiliated in front of 50 people, not a soul speaks up, and now I'm the problem. No, Liv. I'm not saying that. You know how this world works. That's the problem, Olivia whispered. I do. They hung up shortly after, but sleep never came. The memory played again and again in her mind. Michael's smug face. Richard Hartley's silence. And worse, the way some of the women at that table smiled as if they agreed. Olivia sat in the dark for hours. Wrestling with her anger. With her pride. With her responsibility. By sunrise, she had made her decision. She would walk into that boardroom and defend what mattered more than $900 million, her dignity. At 7 a.m. sharp, Olivia stood before the board of directors. The conference room was tense. Suits, whispers, glares. Peter Anderson, the CFO, was already pacing. I just want to make one thing clear, Olivia began, her voice calm but commanding. I'm aware of what this deal means. But I will not continue negotiations with anyone who humiliates me, publicly or privately. I will not reward bigotry with a billion-dollar partnership. Peter slammed his palm on the table. You can't be serious. This isn't just about you, it's about every division we operate. Our investors are watching. If we walk away, we lose credibility. And if we go through with it, Olivia said firmly, we lose our soul. The room went still. For a moment, no one dared speak. Then Margaret Lewis, a board veteran, folded her hands and said, what happened to you was wrong. But we are not in the business of taking moral stands. We're in the business of making money. No, Olivia replied, looking her dead in the eye. We are in the business of leadership. And true leadership starts with knowing when to say enough. There was silence again, this time deeper, heavier. Then Olivia made it official. I'm pulling out of the Hartley deal. Effective immediately. Her words rang out like thunder. Some gasped. Others cursed under their breath. But none of them could shake the feeling they had just witnessed something far more important than a cancelled contract. They had witnessed a stand. Within 24 hours, the business world was in uproar. The moment Olivia's publicist confirmed the withdrawal from the Hartley deal, headlines exploded across every major financial news site. Bennett Dynamics pulls out of historic $900 million partnership. CEO Olivia Bennett cites personal integrity as reason for exit. Tech titan walks away from billionaire family, why? But that was just the start. That same night, as media speculation swirled, an anonymous video surfaced online. Grainy but unmistakable, the 2-minute clip showed the exact moment Michael Hartley raised his champagne glass and made the remark. Did someone mix up and bring the help in early? You could hear the uncomfortable laughter. See Olivia's quiet composure. And, most damning of all, Richard Hartley's refusal to intervene. Within hours, the video had gone viral, shared across every platform, from Twitter to TikTok to LinkedIn. The hashtag #RespectIsPriceless surged to the top of global trends, as millions expressed outrage. Some were shocked. Others said they weren't surprised at all. This is why representation matters, tweeted one user. Olivia Bennett walked away with her dignity intact. And now she's showing the world that no deal is worth your self-respect, another wrote. Corporate leaders, celebrities, and even political figures weighed in. Some commended Olivia's courage. Others condemned the Hartleys' behavior. And while the Hartley family remained eerily silent, public pressure mounted like a rising tide. Inside Hartley Corporation headquarters, the crisis deepened with every passing minute. Their PR lines were jammed, investors were panicking, and employees whispered anxiously in the hallways. Michael, once the golden boy of the family empire, now found himself at the center of a storm he had created. He watched the video over and over, disbelief morphing into fury. "Who the hell filmed that?" he barked at his assistant. "No idea," she replied, pale and visibly shaken. "It must have been one of the catering staff. Someone with a phone in their jacket." Michael slammed his fist onto the desk. "I want names." But it was too late. The video wasn't just out. It was everywhere. And it wasn't just damaging, it was defining. Back at Bennett Dynamics, Olivia was inundated with messages of support. Emails, calls, letters from young professionals and leaders across the world. Some came from women of color who had once doubted their place in the boardroom. Others came from men who admitted they'd never considered how deep casual prejudice could cut. But most moving of all were the notes from janitors, interns, assistants, people who said, for the first time, they felt seen. "Thank you for not backing down," read one message. "You stood up for people like me, who never had the chance to walk away." Olivia read every single one. In a world obsessed with power and profit, it was easy to forget that quiet integrity could still shake the foundations of the powerful. Her friend and VP, Sarah Mitchell, burst into her office 2 days after the video dropped, her tablet in hand and her face lit with disbelief. "Liv, you're not going to believe this," she said, sliding the screen in front of her. "We just received partnership inquiries from Sterling Global, North Star Industries, and Wilson Group." Olivia's brows lifted. "Those are our dream collaborations." Sarah nodded. "And they all say the same thing, they want to work with someone who leads with courage. They said you made the right call, and they want in." Olivia's lips parted, but no words came for a moment. Not joy. Not relief. Just deep, quiet gratitude. She hadn't stood up expecting reward. But now, it seemed, standing up had changed everything. Meanwhile, Michael's world was crumbling. Hartley Corporation stock plummeted 18% in just 2 days. Brands that once lined up to collaborate now issued cold public statements, distancing themselves. Top-level partners pulled out of pending deals. Employee morale sank. The reputation built over generations was unraveling in real time. Richard Hartley summoned an emergency board meeting. For once, his calm demeanor had cracked. The man who had built an empire now stared at the real cost of protecting his son's ego. "This corporation," he said, staring down the long walnut table, "was built on legacy. But legacy means nothing if we don't uphold basic decency." "Michael." "I know, Dad," Michael interrupted, bitter and defensive. "But this is being blown way out of proportion." "It's not," Richard said, his voice icy. "It's being seen for exactly what it is." Later that day, Hartley Corporation's chairman, Thomas Gallagher, made the announcement that shocked even their most seasoned executives. Effective immediately, Michael Hartley is suspended from all executive duties pending full review. Michael froze. "You're firing me from my own company?" "No," Thomas replied evenly. "We're holding you accountable. That's something you've never had to face." The room fell silent. Michael left the building surrounded by flashing cameras and angry protesters holding signs that read, "Dignity $. Boycott Hartley." Olivia stood tall so we could too. For the first time in his life, Michael Hartley felt powerless. And Olivia? She hadn't just walked away. She'd rewritten the rules. A week after the scandal erupted, Olivia Bennett stepped onto the grand stage of the Global Leadership Summit in New York City. It was a hall reserved for the world's most visionary minds, Nobel laureates, heads of state, Fortune 500 CEOs. But that night, all eyes were on her. The woman who had walked away from $900 million without blinking. The woman who had become the face of what it truly meant to lead with dignity. The spotlight shone softly on Olivia as she adjusted the microphone. Dressed in a clean white suit that mirrored the clarity of her stance, she scanned 1,000 seated before her. And then, she spoke. Dignity is not a luxury. It is not a bonus you get after success. It is the foundation for everything, especially in leadership. Her voice was steady, but it carried weight, so much so that even those watching the live stream across the globe leaned in. She didn't launch into a rehearsed speech. Instead, she told the truth. Not long ago, I believed success meant power, profit, and proximity to the elite. I thought that shaking hands with billionaires and landing the biggest deals meant I had made it. But then I found myself standing in a room where I was not seen as a CEO, not even as a human being. I was seen as the help. The crowd murmured, some audibly. But Olivia kept going, unfazed. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could stay quiet, accept the deal, and let it all slide for the sake of money. Or I could walk away. Not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been told, silently or directly, that they don't belong. A long pause. Then she smiled, gently. I walked away. And I've never regretted it. The applause started slowly, soft at first, then roaring. A standing ovation. Not just because she was right, but because she was brave enough to live it. Backstage, Sarah Mitchell stood with tears in her eyes. She just changed the game, one organizer whispered. Forever. The speech rocketed across every network and social platform. Clips of Olivia's remarks played on nightly news and flooded Instagram stories. Her quote, "Success means nothing if you lose your dignity to get it," became a viral mantra. Suddenly, Olivia wasn't just a businesswoman. She was a global symbol of courage and ethics. At universities across the country, students dissected her speech in business ethics classes. Young professionals printed her words and taped them above their desks. Advocacy groups hailed her as a modern-day Rosa Parks of the corporate world, someone who didn't just take a seat at the table, but flipped the table when it was unjust. Meanwhile, the backlash against the Hartleys intensified. Protests erupted outside Hartley Corporation offices in Chicago, San Francisco, London. Signs read. Your silence was loud. No respect, no business. Major investors cut ties. Companies pulled out of joint ventures. Employees leaked internal documents showing a pattern of discriminatory practices. Olivia's experience, it turned out, was only the tip of the iceberg. Michael Hartley became a pariah. He couldn't walk through an airport without cameras in his face. His social accounts were flooded with angry comments. Even members of his own board refused to return his calls. He was no longer seen as a power broker, but as the cautionary tale of what unchecked privilege can destroy. Inside the Hartley mansion, the once mighty family name now rang hollow. The silence in the gilded halls was oppressive. Michael sat alone in the study, the same room where he once smugly strategized billion-dollar deals. Now, he could barely meet his own reflection in the glass. His father, Richard Hartley, eventually entered with slow, heavy steps. He looked older. Tired. I warned you, he said quietly, not with anger, but with sadness. You thought your money could excuse anything. Michael said nothing. You didn't just hurt Olivia, Richard continued. You've disgraced our name. You burned what it took generations to build. Still, Michael remained silent. Fixing this? Richard sighed. It might take the rest of your life. Back at Bennett Dynamics, Olivia's team could barely keep up with the flood of new offers pouring in. Not just for partnerships, but for speaking engagements, mentorship programs, thought leadership events, even non-profit collaborations. Sarah entered Olivia's office one morning with a bright smile and a long list in hand. Liv, we've got Sterling Global on board. Northstar's offering full tech integration. And Wilson Group. They've proposed a 5-year innovation pipeline fully under our control. Olivia raised a brow. That's worth more than the original deal. By nearly double, Sarah nodded. Olivia exhaled, leaning back. Then we're doing it. But only with those who align with our core values. I'm not selling our future to anyone who doesn't understand the value of a human being. Her calm, deliberate tone said everything. This wasn't revenge. This was redemption, with purpose. The fallout from Olivia Bennett's stand rippled far beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. In classrooms from Atlanta to Accra, teachers shared her story as a case study, not just in business ethics, but in human dignity. A high school principal in Baltimore created a week-long Dignity First campaign inspired by Olivia's summit speech. In San Francisco, a group of MBA students started a podcast titled The Bennett Standard, dissecting how ethical leadership could actually outperform greed in the long run. Even in Washington, D.C., the story found its way into the chambers of Congress. A rising senator quoted Olivia on the Senate floor during a debate on corporate accountability. "We've seen what happens when a woman refuses to be bought, now let's make sure the law reflects that courage." Meanwhile, Olivia moved quietly. She declined most interviews. She didn't host grand events or self-congratulatory press tours. Instead, she worked late hours, poring over partnership details, vetting new hires for her diversity initiative, and launching a mentorship network for young professionals of color. And all the while, her reputation soared. Bennett Dynamics stock didn't just recover, it surged, outperforming every major competitor. Clients praised the company's renewed mission-driven strategy. Internally, morale reached an all-time high. Employees felt proud not just of the work they did, but of the woman leading them. Olivia had become something far more dangerous to the old guard than a scandal. She had become a symbol. At the Hartley estate, the reality was much darker. Michael Hartley had been officially removed from his executive role. Though the board hadn't voted to fire him outright, likely out of loyalty to his father, they stripped him of all decision-making power. Public trust was gone. What remained were lawsuits. Multiple former employees, some black, others women, others both, came forward with eerily similar stories. Racial jokes in meetings. Gendered microaggressions. Quiet firings with NDA payouts. HR complaints that mysteriously disappeared. The Hartley brand became synonymous with institutional arrogance. Then came the final blow. A leaked internal memo, clearly written by Michael months before the incident, showed a plan to restructure the company by selling off divisions, where diversity optics won't yield profit. The backlash was instant and merciless. Sponsors dropped the Hartley name from charity galas. Athletes walked away from endorsement deals. The Hartley Foundation, once a proud symbol of philanthropy, had its grants rejected by schools and museums alike. Michael watched it all from the shadows of his father's house. The man who once believed himself untouchable now had to sneak into private gyms to avoid the press, and delete social media to escape death threats and public scorn. And yet, even now, he didn't understand. "She got lucky," he muttered one night to his reflection. "All of this, it's media manipulation. She played them." But his voice lacked conviction. Because deep down, Michael knew the truth, Olivia hadn't played anyone. She had simply refused to play his game. And that refusal had exposed everything. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Olivia stood quietly by the window in her office, watching raindrops track slowly down the glass. Sarah entered, holding an envelope. "You got this today," she said. No return address. No note. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, embossed with gold trim. Olivia unfolded it slowly. It read, "You were right. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know I see it now. Michael Hartley." For a long moment, Olivia said nothing. She folded the note and tucked it away in her desk drawer. Sarah watched her carefully. "You believe him?" Olivia's eyes didn't move from the rain. "It doesn't matter. I didn't stand for him. I stood for me, and everyone else who's been in my shoes. She turned then, her voice soft but unwavering. If he wants redemption, he'll have to earn it. Quietly. Like the rest of us. 3 months after the scandal first broke, Olivia Bennett stepped off a plane in Johannesburg, South Africa, greeted by flashing cameras and a quiet fanfare of dignitaries and young entrepreneurs. She wasn't here for a product launch or a press tour. She was here for something deeper, legacy. At the invitation of the Global Ethics and Leadership Council, Olivia had been asked to lead a week-long symposium on dignity in corporate governance. Delegates flew in from every continent, founders, policy leaders, activists, students, even billionaires who, despite their status, looked to her for answers. The first day, Olivia walked through a classroom filled with wide-eyed faces. A young woman in the front row stood up, trembling slightly. "Ms. Bennett," she began, voice tight with emotion, "when I watched that video of you walking away, I cried. Not because of what was said to you, but because I realized I've stayed silent too long in my own workplace." She paused, holding back tears. "You gave me permission to speak." Olivia didn't respond with a speech. She stepped forward and embraced the young woman, letting the silence speak for itself. Dignity, after all, wasn't just an idea. It was an inheritance, a fire passed from one soul to another. Back in the United States, the Hartley family's empire teetered on the brink. The restructuring plans failed. Institutional investors pulled out. A full-scale federal investigation had been opened into discriminatory hiring practices across multiple Hartley subsidiaries. Richard Hartley was summoned to testify before a congressional committee, forced to defend decades of boardroom decisions that no longer held water. But the worst news came in the form of an announcement from Sterling Global, once a quiet partner of the Hartleys, now a vocal supporter of Olivia Bennett. They had acquired a major Hartley competitor, and with it, key patents and distribution networks. In effect, the Hartleys were being boxed out of their own market. Richard Hartley sat in his library, the fire flickering low, his empire crumbling around him. Michael entered quietly, no longer the self-assured heir, but a man worn thin by disgrace. "I never thought it would come to this," Michael said, his voice hollow. Richard didn't look at him. "You thought our name was a shield. But names mean nothing without honor." There was silence. And then, for the first time in his life, Michael Hartley spoke with sincerity. "I want to fix it. I don't know how, but I want to try." Richard turned slowly, his old eyes searching his son's face for the boy he'd once raised. "Then start where you fell," he said quietly. "And be prepared to fall again." Meanwhile, Olivia returned home from her global tour with a new vision. She launched the Dignity Initiative, a cross-industry coalition that set new standards for ethical business conduct. Over 200 companies pledged to follow its guidelines within the first month, including major tech firms, manufacturing giants, and educational institutions. The initiative trained young leaders, audited corporate cultures, and built safe spaces for whistleblowers. What began as one woman's refusal to be belittled became a global movement. She had turned pain into purpose. Insult into institution. And though Olivia rarely spoke of the Hartleys anymore, the public hadn't forgotten. Her name was now taught in leadership seminars and cited in policy journals. The Bennett Doctrine, a term coined by Harvard Business Review, described leadership rooted in integrity above all else. Sarah Mitchell watched it all unfold beside her. One evening, as they reviewed the latest partner list, she said, "You realize what you've done, don't you?" Olivia smiled faintly. "What?" "You changed the definition of power. And people are finally listening." Olivia looked out the window toward the city she once feared would swallow her whole. Now it was her stage. Her statement. "No," she replied, almost to herself. "They're not listening to me. They're listening to themselves. I just reminded them of what they already knew." 1 year after the infamous Hartley incident, Olivia Bennett stood once again beneath a spotlight, but this time, it was brighter than ever. The United Nations had chosen her to receive the Global Human Dignity Award, the highest honor ever given to a private sector leader. The hall was packed with heads of state, Nobel laureates, cultural icons, and young people from over 100 countries. A full orchestra played softly in the background. Cameras flashed from every corner of the room. But Olivia didn't walk onto the stage with a grand entrance. She walked with silence, grace, and the same poise she had shown that night in the Hartley ballroom, back when the world still doubted her. Only now, there was no doubt left. She approached the podium. The crowd hushed instantly. "I didn't plan to stand here," she began, "because I never intended to become a symbol. I just made a choice. A choice not to stay silent. Not to be small for anyone's comfort." She looked around, her eyes landing gently on the crowd. "But what I've learned is this: every time we choose dignity over fear, we don't just protect ourselves. We build a path for others to walk through with their heads held high." A standing ovation followed, long and thunderous. Yet even as praise poured in, Olivia remained grounded. She declined private jets, insisted on flying commercial, and spent the evening after the awards in a small cafe with Sarah and her core team, talking not about the award, but about new school partnerships and internships for young leaders from underserved communities. Meanwhile, far from the world stage, Michael Hartley was in a very different room. A small community college auditorium in New Jersey, half filled with working-class adults trying to finish their degrees. Michael stood behind a lectern, noticeably humbled in jeans and a plain button-down. No assistants. No press. He had agreed to speak voluntarily at a workshop on accountability in leadership. Not as an expert, but as a cautionary tale. When he took the mic, he hesitated before speaking. "I used to think leadership was about control," he said. "That having money or power meant you could say anything, do anything, and get away with it." A few attendees folded their arms skeptically. "I was wrong," he continued. "I disrespected someone who deserved nothing but honor. I didn't just cost my company a deal, I cost myself my identity. Because you can't lead anyone until you understand what it means to respect everyone." There were no cheers. No applause. Just silence. But that silence was more honest than any ovation he'd ever received. And for the first time in his life, Michael spoke not to win favor, but to grow. Afterward, a middle-aged woman approached him, holding her nursing textbook. "I don't like what you did," she said, bluntly. "But if you're here to change, I hope you mean it." Michael nodded quietly. "So do I." Back in Los Angeles, Olivia sat by her window late at night, watching city lights blink like stars against the skyline. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Did you see the footage of Michael at the community college?" Olivia watched the clip. No PR spin. No cameras planted. Just a man trying, at last, to understand the damage he'd done. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just nodded once and whispered, "Maybe that's a start." She had no interest in revenge. Her victory had never been about seeing him fall, it had always been about standing tall. And that's exactly what she had done. In a world obsessed with status, Olivia Bennett reminded us that the most powerful person in the room is not the richest, but the one who refuses to compromise their dignity. She turned a moment of public humiliation into a global movement of respect, self-worth, and ethical leadership. As she once said, "Success means nothing if you lose your dignity to get it." So what would you do when faced with that same choice? If this story moved you, we invite you to like, share, and subscribe to True Echo, where real stories meet real power. And let us know in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between your values and what the world calls success? Thank you for watching.